Support your local theatre and arts industry and enjoy a show at the Shedley. Playford's iconic Shedley Theatre is bringing a great selection of local and national performances to Elizabeth.
For more information on their upcoming shows, visit theshedley.com.au or call 8256 0500.
Did you know your food scraps should go in the green bin or a home compost system? It's better for the environment. It's the right thing to do. And it's easy. Fight food waste by putting all your food scraps, peels and leftovers in the green bin. To find out more, visit playford.sa.gov.au/fightfoodwaste.
Want to know what's happening in the community? Subscribe to our e-newsletter, Playford News, at playford.sa.gov.au, and you'll be on top of stories, news and what's happening in Playford. It's local news for
All right, good evening all, and welcome to this July meeting of the City of Playford Council Assessment Panel. Take this opportunity to welcome members and staff and those who have joined us in the gallery and online this evening. I will introduce our panel members and staff to you shortly, but I'll just start by reading our acknowledgement of country. We would like to acknowledge that this land we meet on today is the traditional land of the Kaurna people, and that we respect their spiritual relationship with their country. The City of Playford would also like to pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. So as we do have a gallery with us this evening, I'll introduce the members of the panel to you. So to my left is Aaron Curtis, and to my right is Adam Squires. And at the table down there we have Councillor Misty Norris and Paul Micken. My name is Jeff Parsons, I'm the presiding member. We're ably assisted by members of Council's administration. With us tonight we have Matt, our assessment manager, Leif, our manager of planning services, Andrew, two of our planners who are with us tonight to introduce our items, Sky on minutes, Kiralee with governance and other staff who are assisting us with IT support this evening. So welcome to you all. We just have a few administrative items to get through, and then we will get to our items for consideration this evening. So attendance record tonight, members, all members are present, there are no apologies. The minutes of the last meeting was held on the 19th of June. I think all members have received a copy of those minutes. No questions in relation to the minutes? Right. In that case, I'm looking for a mover that they be adopted, please. Misty, you're moving, thank you. Is there a seconder? Aaron, thank you. All those in favour, please raise your hands. It's carried unanimously. Thanks. Applications withdrawn. So as members would realise, would have seen from the email correspondence, we've had a request to withdraw the second item on our agenda this evening, and I considered that request in accordance with the, in consultation with the assessment manager, and agreed to the withdrawal of that item. Declaration of interest. Does any member have a declaration of interest in respect of the remaining two items this evening? Right, members, so this does bring us to our first item for consideration this evening. So this is an application for the construction of 3 shops in the form of restaurants and 1 shop for general retail purposes with associated signage, landscaping, parking and manoeuvring areas and earthworks. Located at 17 Stevenheath Road in Edinburgh North in the Strategic Employment Zone. And the recommendation is to grant planning consent. Now, Andrew, you are the assessing officer for the application. Is there anything you'd like to take us through as an introduction to the item?
No, there's not.
All right, thank you. Now, understand we do have representatives of the applicant with us from URPS. We have Matt and Matilda, so there were no representatives, so there's no formal opportunity to be heard, but there is an opportunity for you to ask any questions of the applicant if you wish. Do we have any questions that you'd like to pose? Yeah, Matt or Matilda, whoever's speaking, can I ask one of you just to come forward to the podium up here? Or both of you? Just up here. Yeah, yep.
Is that on? Hello? I feel like I'm doing a presentation.
Yeah. Okay. The first question through the chair is, has there been any confirmation or further progress on the tenant for the what's designated as retail shop, noting that the MFY report refers to a tyre outlet, but then the officer report talks about a general retail?
I think there was some potential excitement about it being a Guzmani Gomez from Andrew Simons on the phone to Matilda. My understanding, I spoke to Hamish Brown, who's the director at Leighton Property. It's probably more likely to be a fast food outlet in a similar vein to the others that are proposed. I think there was an earlier proposal from a service trade premises type operator. So that might have been why that's in the MFY report, but my understanding is that it's most likely to be another fast food operator, Paul. Come on.
So I understand your question's probably more to do with the fourth shop. So we've got 3 drive-throughs. One of those, the tenant hasn't been committed as yet. And then I understand your question would be more to do with that fourth shop. Is that, yeah. So again, that tenancy isn't committed. It's more likely to be sort of a, so there was potential for it to be a service trade premises that wasn't locked away, and I guess that would have been part of our application as a different use if that was the case. It's going to be just a general shop, really. There's a question whether it might be bulky goods. In that case, they'd need further approval under a new land use, but it would just be a general shop as the nature at the moment.
On the parking then, was the 11 spaces that are shown around that building, was that based on being a service trade premises like a tyre retailer?
No, so that's just based on the rate for the floor area as just a general shop.
Chair, the URPS report refers to or gives an indication of all the activity centres in the area, including local and the urban. It says that the closest local activity centre to the west is 11 kilometres away, but I understand there's one just several hundred metres to the northwest on Wamma Road. Does that make any difference to your assessment?
No, so the one 11 kilometres away is the local activity centre zone. Not familiar with one that's closer to that on that western side. There's certainly ones that are closer on the east and northeastern side.
I don't think it wouldn't make any difference to our assessment. I mean, the proposal and the nature of the shops that are proposed are contemplated in the zone, and they're not the type of activities or out of centre activities that would impact on the fundamental operating of a centre anyway, because you don't have a significant supermarket or anchor tenant that would impact on such an operation. So I don't think it would, Paul, irrespective of whether there's some accuracy issues in that part of our report.
Sure, thank you. Do you have any further questions, members, for the applicant? Yeah, Adam.
Thank you. And look, I appreciate this might be a question you don't know the answer to. The balance of the site, there's obviously the Drake's distribution centre to the southern portion of the land, and there's a strip of land basically in between the development site and the Drake's. Has there been any discussion around intentions there, or is that sort of outside of the area of influence for your client? Just sort of trying to understand what's intended there.
We've got, and correct me if I'm wrong, Matilda, but we don't have any master plan for that portion of land. We haven't been given any indication about how that land might be used. So, yeah, in short, no, we don't have any indication as to how that might be used.
Thank you. Anything further, members? I just have one question. It relates to so part of the access is going to happen through the access road that is used to get to McDonald's at the moment. What's the nature of the ownership and tenure arrangements? Is there any problem with access being obtained through that road?
Yeah, so MFY have looked at that, you're right. If anything, there was maybe some follow-up after the McDonald's development that has led to some improvements in that access. Certainly, yeah, that is a consideration that it's part of that McDonald's access. If the question is in terms of the ownership and how that's managed, I guess that's to be set up through easements, I assume, or it's not clear.
Whereabouts are we talking?
So on this side. So, as I understand, our client will be responsible for the upgrades to this access point and within the road corridor of Womer Road. And then, yeah, the access road would remain within McDonald's because that's established along that, western boundary. And then the title for the other allotments would be through that. But irrespective, there's independent access for this subject site off Womer Road as well as a double up. The McDonald's, as we understand too, the ownership of all of these is connected in a way that we're not dealing with different landowners across the titles either.
No, thank you. All right, members, if you have no further questions, then thank you very much, Matt and Matilda. We appreciate that. Now, members, do you have any questions you'd like to pose to Andrew or council staff? Yes, Paul.
One fairly simple question. I know that there's no recommended condition relating to the hours of operation for the restaurants. So despite KFC, I think, being until midnight, it would give them flexibility to go 24/7 in the future. Is that correct?
Yes, that would be correct. Yep, that would need to be the subject of a variation application.
Sure, thank you. Any further questions, members? If there are none, and we can always return to further questions if they come up through our debate, I seek your views in respect to this matter. We do have some thorough documentation that's been submitted as part of the application. We have a very good quality report from the administration with a recommendation that planning consent be granted. What are your views? Who would like to go first? No, that's Aaron. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks through the chair. Yeah, look, I support the development. I commend the staff for the report that was thorough and well prepared. I think pretty solid rationale for the land use and the even though the land use in terms of I guess the zone not being explicitly supported, the being on the edge of the strategic employment zone and adjacent to residential, I think is a fairly reasonable outcome. I do tend to agree that they're, even though maybe in context they may or could be debated as to whether they're low impact, I think when you consider the context of the locality, I think it's an appropriate development outcome. I agree with the report that I don't see that these proposed clustering of the fast food outlets would undermine or diminish the viability of other centres. I think there's a fairly strong rationale in the planning report. I agree that these fast food outlets predominantly focus around the car, and they're compatible with the existing uses, you know, the service station, the McDonald's in the locality. On an arterial road, I think it's a logical approach. In terms of the impact of the facility, I think that's been fairly well addressed with the report in terms of the impacts on adjacent lands. I'm reasonably comfortable about that. Details of access, car parking are well addressed in the report. The retention of the 2 significant trees, which are a noted one, I think there's good opportunity to keep them, and that's been considered within the report. The signage, freestanding signage, is compatible with, even though it's in excess of what what's contemplated in the code. I think it's consistent with other signage that's been previously approved. So overall, I'm generally comfortable with the proposal. Thanks.
Thank you. Adam.
Thank you. Look, echo Aaron's thoughts in terms of the quality of the report. It's covered things well, and commendation to staff. I'd also commend the staff and the applicant for the work to retain the significant tree within the site. I think, going past the site, it is a large tree that contributes significantly to the visual amenity of the area. So I think that is a good outcome. From a land use point of view, it is something that, I suppose, looking at the intent of the strategic employment zone, it did give me a little bit of pause at the start, but it is important to acknowledge this site does border a residential type zone, which then limits the ability to introduce some of those land uses that you might otherwise see in a strategic employment zone. So that did offset some of those concerns, noting that, I suppose, at a more broad level, some of the shortages around employment land through the state. I think the land uses, are consistent to the extent that detailed in the report, so I was comfortable in that aspect. I think the balance of the site has reasonable potential for development as well. The balanced land between the Drakes and the subject site here is comparable to what you've got along the eastern side of Seven Heath Road, and those have been reasonably developed for other land uses, so I think we're not predetermining that land can't be used at a future point. The signage, echoing Aaron's, comfortable there given the consistency with the other signage on the site. Comfortable with the recommendation as drafted.
Thank you. Misty.
Thank you. Look, I was really quite interested to read this one because I had a lot of questions as I was reading it, but I felt like everything actually got answered. So that was really good, and kudos to, putting all the information in there. In terms of the strategic employment zone, look, I think most things have been covered. I really appreciate that they're obviously landscaping 20% of the site, which is more than they're required to do. In terms of parking as well, obviously that's above and beyond what is actually needed, but it's great to see that, there's additional room for movement there should it get busier. I really appreciate as well, and I did have a few inquiries from residents around the trees that sort of are along Womma Road, and I again appreciate that has been kept in the plans so that we don't have to get rid of that tree. In terms of signage, again, as was said before, it's consistent with what's already there, so the 8.5 metres. 110 metres between shops and residential. Look, the one at Blake's Crossing is closer again, and look, things seem to be working, so I'm okay with that. I think in terms of fitting in with the zone, it's got convenient day-to-day services, it complements the activity zone. Obviously there's a build-up of, sort of activity going on around Womma Road as well. What else did I write? The only concerns I really had, and look, they're not in so much to do with the actual development, but more just around littering. There's already a lot of littering that happens around Manapara because there's a build-up of takeaway shops there, so that's a concern. Obviously, the operational hours that Paul brought up as well. Look, it may have a need to operate 24/7 in the future. I just don't see how that works currently. And my only other concern, and this is probably more for us and the state government, is the peak hour build-up of traffic around the roundabouts. And I guess just sort of, I think there is good movement within the actual development itself in terms of roadways, but I guess, if they're coming out back onto Wamma Road, they're not really going to be able to cross back over to go up or east Wamma Road. They're going to have to keep going down. I just get concerns because it gets quite hectic along there during peak hour. So I guess, that's just something we're going to have to work with and see how that goes. But overall, the application looks really good and I'm in support.
Thank you. Paul.
Thank you. I concur with all the comments from the fellow members, noting in particular that the zone clearly envisages shops of this nature, being restaurants. I'll come to the shop and to the general retail in a moment. I don't believe it's going to impact out of existing activity centres, that these types of uses are commonly found outside activity centres, and there's already an example just right next door with the McDonald's. I think the shop initially had some concern there, firstly in respect that it was 400 square metres, which is above the 250 the zone envisages, and also the lack of parking. I think it's about only providing 50% of what it was required. I note the applicant has argued that that there's opportunity for sharing with the Hungry Jack's next door, and perhaps whatever development occurs to the west. I guess time will only tell whether that works, but I don't think the floor area and the parking, I don't think that they're significant enough, those concerns, to warrant refusal of the whole application. I think signage is, again, higher than the policy envisages, but that the signs would be compatible with what others exist in the area, in particular the McDonald's and also the service station at the roundabout, which both will exceed 6 metres. I see merit in the internal movement proposed. That will take a lot of traffic off of Wamma Road, especially people who may want to go to multiple fast food outlets. And finally, commend the applicant for amending the proposal to retain both trees, acknowledging, however, that the easternmost tree, I forget which number it is, might be compromised by future roadworks, but that's something for the future, and it's could be many years away, and in the meantime, that tree's going to provide a lot of amenity. So I support the proposal.
Thank you. And look, I have similar views, members. I'll try not to labour the points too much. Look, first of all, I don't think the proposal is seriously at variance. I agree with the assessment of the staff. I think the approach adopted in the report is the right one. I'd thank the administration because they sought some views from their strategic policy section, which was in the report, and I think that was useful for the considerations around land use. The zone envisages high impact industrial uses, that's clear, but I think, as other members have spoken about, it's necessary to have an interface with more low impact uses, and while these might be low impact depending on how they're designed and sited and so forth, I do think they serve an appropriate interface. They do serve workers in the area, although it's pretty clear that's not their sole purpose. I also think that the approach by the staff with respect to considering the impact on the activity centres is the right one. I don't think it does negatively impact or undermine the role of the activity centre, and I guess I have that view particularly because of the way the code's worded, and the staff report summarises that on page 15 and what the focus is for activity centres. And I just don't think drive-through restaurants undermine that. So I was satisfied with the approach, satisfied with the land use question. I often talk about the importance of designing for context. I generally don't think it's appropriate just to put standard format stores in areas without considering what sort of built form is around them. But I think when you look at the locality here, the built form that already exists, the nature of the main roads and so forth, I do think the design of the buildings is appropriate. I thought the signs were probably excessive, but I accept the advice of the administration and, yeah, agree with the other comments members have made around the trees. It's a very beneficial approach to retain trees that are obviously, as Misty said, of importance to the locality and the community. So it does sound as if we are all in agreement, and I haven't necessarily heard any members speak about potential changes to conditions, so I might ask whether there's any member who's prepared to move the recommendation as it currently stands, or whether you do have any suggested amendments. Yes, Adam, you're happy to move?
Yeah, happy to move as drafted.
Sure. So I'll take Adam as the mover. Is there a seconder? Seconded, Paul, thank you. Comes the motion, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. So for the benefit of those who have joined us, the application has been granted planning consent. Obviously there's still some steps in terms of building consent, development approval and so forth. And if you do have any questions on the process from here, then welcome to talk to the administration next business day. So thank you very much for your attendance. And we must now move on to our next item for consideration. So, members, this is an application for a single-storey childcare centre with associated play areas, fencing, landscaping, on-site car parking, the removal of 4 trees, 2 regulated and 2 significant, by Development Holdings Proprietary Limited at Lot 144 John Rice Avenue in Elizabeth South. It's in the Strategic Innovation Zone and the Activity Node Subzone, performance assessed, and the recommendation is to grant planning consent. And Andrew, you were the assessing officer for the application. Is there anything you'd like to take us through as an introduction?
Thank you, Presiding Member. I will raise a few points, if I may. Panel, you may recall an application was reviewed and approved by the panel back in February for a land division to create 4 allotments. The land subject to this proposal is identified as proposed allotment 4 on the eastern sort of corner of this allotment, with the subject site a smaller portion of that proposed allotment 4. It's approximately 2,600 square metres. The land is owned by council. It still is owned by council with the intention that that is to be transferred to future landowners. There is a contract of sale that is going through the process, but as yet titles have yet to be created, so hence council still is the legal owner. Given council is the owner, we've taken the approach that as they do stand to raise some revenue from the sale, that it's appropriate that the application is delegated to the panel for your consideration. I just thought I'd flag that. It's documented in the report, but important to flag that and to be transparent. Land and site is sited within the Strategic Innovation Zone, and particularly it also has a activity node subzone. This subzone has a number of provisions which are quite unique. Unique is a rare word in the code, but certainly in this circumstance, it has a number of provisions that emphasise design on a number of corner sites within this particular precinct, within this particular subzone. As you'd be aware, there has been an amended design that has been provided by the applicant that sought to address some of the design-related concerns addressed by or flagged by council administration, and that particularly relates to consistency with performance outcome 2.4 and 2.5 of the subzone. They're quite unique in the way that they emphasise iconic buildings. Interesting terminology, but certainly it's defined in the code in terms of what is defined as iconic. And in the context of this particular application, it's part of the challenge of this site is the noise and air emissions overlay applies over both the land and the site. The interesting component about that particular overlay is it requires consideration of road noise impacts upon outdoor play areas of childcare facilities. So that's in addition to your typical consideration of acoustic impacts of a land use upon existing sort of sensitive uses. So it's been a design position to try and minimise the impact of fencing on the overall built form design to ensure that the building itself retains its iconic as much in terms of its presence on that corner site. I'm certainly of the opinion that the amended position or design that has been provided meets that sort of fine balance between design and acoustic sort of treatments. I'll also add, which hasn't been, it's a little bit different too, or added to the context of the report, is this particular subzone does cover quite a large spatial area. So it covers all of the Lower McEwen precinct with the subject land and the subject site located in a locality that's notably different to the balance of that subzone. Notable element of that is the Lower McEwen Hospital and the surrounding medical precincts, which is of a high scale, high built form and certainly of a different type of form. In particular, on the corner of Haydown Road and John Rice Avenue, which is identified in one of these particular policy performance outcomes, it talks about creating a built form that creates an iconic entrance. And certainly that particular building is a notable multi-levelled medical sort of facility that does create a gateway to that key precinct area. And I only raise that because I think the subject land and the subject site is of a lower density, it's of a lower scale, has a lower built form, everything's single story, or it's actually quite open and has an open space sort of context. So in the context of this proposal being only single story, I think it actually meets the intent of that particular subzone criteria. In regards to the regulated and significant tree removals, 2 reg and 2 significant trees proposed to be removed. I've demonstrated in the report, I think there's a suitable justification for the removal of all 4 trees. But I note during the assessment it was picked up that a regulated tree adjoining the subject site on the western proposed boundary, which is within the subject land, may be impacted by some of the temporary battering that's proposed for the proposed childcare facility. The tree is not proposed to be removed. However, it's currently unknown if the extent of civil works that's associated with the childcare facility will actually result in any substantial tree damaging impacts. Discussions with the applicant, we sought to consider a way forward and resolve to consider a reserve matter, which addresses 2 issues. One is the anticipated built form design and the levels that may come about through that, and also the design of the balance of Lot 4. Now, Lot 4 is under the same ownership, currently the City of Playford, but certainly will be under the same ownership. The contract of sale is going to the same future landowner. There is a master plan which documents the certain types of built form that is proposed, but it's yet to be landed where that building will be sited. There has been some discussion that tree actually may be retained, so we're just not too sure exactly where it fits within this particular process. So the reserve matter sought to recognise that depending on the outcomes of that particular, the finish floor levels and benching levels of the proposed childcare facility, but also the adjoining development, it may in itself constitute tree damaging activity, but we're confident the reserve matter provides the flexibility for the assessment manager to work through that process and resolve it accordingly. Lastly, it's understood that a question has been raised about the location of air conditioning units and other mechanical units within the site. Administration has sort of taken in consideration an environmental noise assessment that has identified that. And I'll just refer to an extract in the acoustic report prepared by SONUS. It's attachment 4, it's section 4.2, which is basically I'll read it out. As is typical at the development application stage, the proposed mechanical plant units have not yet been designed or selected. Therefore, the assessment of the mechanical plant has been based on a typical selection consisting of 2 outdoor air conditioning units. Sound level assumed for the air conditioning units are provided in Appendix C. Essentially, that talks about the mechanical plant rates and it's the dB levels, and it's midway between car park activities and childcare noises of children, varying at the age group of the children in certain areas. But of particular interest, it talks about the continuous operation. Their assessment, has been based on the continuous operation of the mechanical plant within the quote plant end quote area. The plant area is actually referenced on the site plan. It's on the western side of the proposed childcare facility, which seeks to ensure the built form itself will screen noise from that plant to mechanical air conditioning units to the residential allotments to the further east. There is also an acoustic fence along Mark Road that actually helps to obviously alleviate those concerns. So we were comfortable that that addresses that issue, but we have drafted a condition or reserve matter should the panel members we seek some further clarification on where that sits. I've probably spoken enough, so I'll leave that to you. Thank you.
No, thank you. It's very helpful for the panel, I think. You have a request on. I was going to ask if there's any questions for the applicant, but yes, Misty.
I actually don't have a question. I believe there may be a material conflict here due to the fact that council still own the land. So I'm actually going to remove myself. So I just thought I'd better let you know before we go ahead with the rest of it.
No, absolutely. And it's obviously your responsibility as a member to declare a conflict if you think there is one. So that's fine. We will invite you back in momentarily. We'll make sure the minutes reflect that, please. All right, members, we obviously still have a quorum, so we can still proceed. Now, are there any questions you would like to pose to the applicant? Because I believe we do have representatives from Acoustics with us. Paul, question for the applicant? Yeah, Rick, did you want to come forward?
Hello, Rick. Through the chair. I'm just interested about the balance of the site and whether you have any firm proposals for the balance of the site, your client, and if so, how advanced they are.
Yeah, there are discussions happening for the remainder of the site, but probably not at the point that I can share firmly what they are tonight or what the proposals are. But certainly there are discussions advancing on the remainder of the land. But I can't, not in a position to share them now.
I appreciate that. To your knowledge, have there been any, I imagine there must have been some plans already considered for the balance of the site. Where I'm leading to is was consideration given to reconfiguring the parking, to avoid the need for stacked parking, which I accept might be elsewhere, but isn't the ideal situation, but also more importantly that the parking could have been reconfigured to retain the significant or regulated tree that is in that area. Given that there's no other development on site, but I'd be interested to know whether the footprints and associated infrastructure for those undisclosed other developments, are they going to preclude that happening, if that makes sense?
No, it does. It does make sense. I think there has certainly the Accord are working to a broad master plan for the site, and I guess this portion was selected for the childcare centre as it is. I think probably taking a step back across this whole land parcel, which is an open space reserve and was sort of planted as that when it was developed many years ago. In some ways, the change of zoning that's occurred and the intent to create the medical precinct across this site is going to create, I guess, as we go over the site, there will create some challenges with retention of all the trees. And when you see the report, the trees are interspersed right across the land holding. So there will be some challenges in retaining trees. This location on the portion was selected sort of makes sense from a design point of view of where the car parking does go. So I guess in that case it has resulted in conflict with those trees in this location of the site, unfortunately. The intent, I guess, the stack parking arrangement, if I can comment as well, is something that is reasonably common practice within childcare centre type arrangements, particularly, and often would be used for staff type parking, so they would use that section of the site. And the intent would be with the childcare centre and as part of the operator's requirements that it's only the childcare centre that accesses that part of the site and uses it, so it'd be the limited number of users familiar with that car parking space, and that's why the stacked arrangement was considered acceptable as an outcome for this site and proposal.
No, thank you. Any other questions for the applicant while they're with us? Yeah, Aaron.
Yeah, thank you, Rick. Just a question relating to the front fencing and it's mentioned in the staff report in relation to the acoustics and the proposal to have perspex that ties in with the open style fencing. I just wouldn't mind hearing your thoughts on that and how you think that will perform in terms of acoustic.
It has been designed with the input of the project architect and the acoustic advisor, so I'll take their advice in terms it would work and function from the acoustic point of view and meet those requirements. As Drew alluded in the opening, it's been part of the aspect of designing this proposal to design an outcome where there is some interaction with the public space, which is why I've gone for the batten style fencing that has the see-through with that plastic perspex or the barrier behind it, so you still can see through into the site rather than creating a solid barrier. And as you see through the amendments, there were some revisions to that fencing design to open up further what was originally proposed, but we see that as a solution that can work.
Yes, Adam. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Look, expanding a little bit on what Paul touched on earlier for the balance of the site, I suppose just for the benefit of the panel, there's a level of comfort, obviously, for your client that the balance of the site is something that can be readily developed. I suppose I'm conscious it becomes somewhat constrained by the way that this development's located and the easements and the proposed access roads and that aspect of it, and the needs to which Andrew talked to before around the sort of the facade and the visibility of buildings, that sort of thing. Has that been taken into account in the master planning of the future work that you've got in mind?
Yes, it has been. I think they've looked at, the positioning of this, segment and use of the site as part of that overall site. The lot that has been approved does have multiple access points, so it does provide that flexibility of, how future buildings could be arranged, but also how future access could occur into the site there's the right-of-way that runs along the western boundary of the proposed allotment, so it does provide options to be able to utilise that for the remaining portion of the site. So I think, yes, it has been considered in terms of what impact that, this proposal has on the future developability, and obviously from the applicant's point of view, they're looking at that from the whole development site, so they want to ensure that they have those remaining spaces that can be developed in the future. So yes, it has been considered as part of this site.
Thank you.
I think that's all of our questions, so thank you very much, Rick, for your time. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
Do you have any further questions for staff members? Yes, Adam.
Look, I suppose it's just a question for the administration in the context of how this site, works within the broader health precinct, the strategic innovation zone and the subzone that sits there. I'd imagine council went through a process to understand, potential developers of the site and land uses and that sort of thing. I suppose just trying to understand what the driver for a childcare centre at the location was, given what we sort of heard in February about the sort, the land uses envisaged and the council's views for the site. Noting, I suppose, the childcare centres can be accommodated in a number of different zones. So just trying to understand that aspect.
Thanks for the question. Council went through a expression of interest process for the land as a whole. So the site and its locality and its connection through to the existing hospital does create some level of distance. Generally speaking, those higher end medical type facilities are looking to be in real close proximity to the Lyell McEwin Hospital. So then you start to move towards some of those more service-based industries, and when we've got significant employment base within particularly the Lyell McEwin and associated medical facilities surrounding it, we see that as a land use that can really support and add value to the success of that precinct as a whole.
Yeah, thank you. Paul.
Yes, it's along the same lines in regard to the master plan. Now, I know that doesn't have any statutory weight, but is my interpretation correct that the master plan doesn't indicate any preferred land use for that site? It simply shows it as future development?
Yeah, that's correct. And I guess the work that was done as part of the master plan back in 2010, I believe, did, I guess, lead towards the policy that was drafted in the development plan of having land uses of association and allowing for that, I guess, as ancillary uses to what is the medical precinct, and then moving into the code, this is then the subzone that then got applied. So yeah, I think as part of the master plan it envisaged, I guess, the expansion of the health precinct, but not necessarily the specifics of the land uses that must be there, more what could be as part of that.
Do you? Yeah.
It's not so much a question, but this whole this application and the subzone in particular has got my mind. My mind is twisted in respect to what role a subzone plays. I've always considered a subzone to be sort of facilitative rather than restrictive, so that in this case the strategic innovation zone lists a number of uses including childcare centre, and then the subzone effectively says in addition to those you can also have these additional uses, or this is what we expect. However, then looking at the policy for innovative or landmark, what is it called? Iconic buildings, the way they're written, they almost seem to be a requirement or a desire which don't appear in the zone. And I'm twisted because if you apply the logic, or if you give weight to the iconic building policy, should you also give the same sort of weight or interpretation to the land uses, which strictly would say, well, childcare centre is not envisaged in the subzone and therefore is not appropriate. I don't know, no real question there. It's more that something's been going around in my mind.
Well, it might be useful to have some commentary because, yeah, I think that was a very good question.
Thank you, Paul. Through the presiding member, look, those same questions crossed our minds through the assessment. And it's well noted what you're saying. The subzone is unique. They all are intended to be unique and provide additional guidance on how best to apply appropriate policies over a subject land. The zone itself provides a broader range of anticipated types of land use, where it then is refined to a lesser degree in the subzone. But the subzones do have that criteria where the PO emphasises more of an entertainment and recreational uses that complement. The designated performance feature clearly states that development comprises one or more of the following in addition to those identified in the zone. So it does give that clarification. It's slightly different to what you would see in a different zone configuration, where it clearly does give linkage back to the zone itself. And we recognise that, and I think I flagged that in the report, sort of, we appreciate that sort of through the whole process of, and I'm conscious that I wasn't involved in those processes back from development plan amendments and master planning process, but there was an understanding it may have been along those lines of health-related infrastructure and services. But it didn't explicitly state you couldn't have a childcare facility in that area. It was relatively silent on that space. So we still think the childcare centre does provide a service to that broader community, to that medical precinct, but certainly recognise that it's not a land use that's actively sought within that area. It was one we grappled for quite a while.
Thank you. That's good advice. We have further questions? No. In that case, members, I seek your views in respect of this item. It obviously is one that has a difficult question to grapple with in terms of land use, but we do have very good information before us and a thorough report and a recommendation that planning consent is granted, subject to a number of reserve matters and conditions. What are your views in respect of this one? Adam, thank you.
Yeah, look, thank you, and thanks again to the administration. Very comprehensive report, and the further detail provided by Andrew tonight has been beneficial. I think there is a natural tension between the zone and the subzone, and what the application we have before us today actually is reasonably finely balanced in where it sits in that space. On balance, I'm comfortable with the recommendation. I do have a level of concern that the balance of the site may prove problematic to develop while still achieving attractive frontage to John Rice Avenue, but I'm informed by the advice from the applicant that that's being considered, and also reassured by that's something staff will have considered, because it does create a somewhat constrained site with an inverted L shape, for want of a better word. That is something that will need to be considered at a future point in time. It's not part of the current application. I acknowledge that. I think the other aspects in regard to parking and stormwater are well covered, and the reserve matters are appropriate in this instance. The removal of the trees, while it is difficult to consider removal of trees, I do acknowledge that Council's deliberate intent behind the revocation of the community land status and the rezoning has foreshadowed a certain, the loss of trees on the site would be, expected in some way, and in this instance, I think it's an acceptable outcome. So, yeah, comfortable with the recommendation in this instance.
Thank you. Paul, I think, had his light on.
Thank you. Look, overall, I support the recommendation. I believe that I'm a little embarrassed now that I missed those words about in addition to those owned and listed and things. So I think it's quite clear that childcare centre is envisaged in this, both the zone and the subzone. So from a land use point of view, it's acceptable. I did have concerns about the parking, and I hear what the applicant's saying about that this stacked parking is not uncommon, especially with childcare centres. And I guess it's inevitable, therefore, that there will be a loss of some vegetation. And I recall at the meeting where we approved the land division that I may have even made the comment that I think the fact that the community land status has been revoked, the subdivision, that it was basically a death knell to a lot of the vegetation on the site, that it was inevitable that there has to be some significant removal in spots to allow development, otherwise the land would be sort of sterilised. And I note that the officers have noted that there are clusters of vegetation that are going to be protected and maintained across the whole site. But I accept now that the location of these two trees, or the regulated trees, are in a position that really, if they were to be retained, they would pose, I guess, unreasonable restrictions on the potential development of the site. I think the policy seeking iconic buildings, I note there that the applicant has amended the proposal to give a bit more, I guess, design focus, and probably maybe while it's not the iconic out of the box types of design that those policies might have sought, I think in this location that what's been presented to us is going to be acceptable. Yeah, that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Aaron.
Yeah, thanks through the chair. Yeah, I agree with the other members' thoughts. Yeah, in terms of the land use, I think the rationale from staff as to the, and clearly in the zone that this land use is envisaged, but I think there is a clear rationale when you consider how the land use can be complementary to other uses in the precinct. Yeah, I think the report was really well presented. I think the staff have worked with the applicant to achieve good amendments, and I think it shows with having more bespoke policy like a subzone, like in this case, where it actually can support a better development outcome. So I think that's welcomed. I think some of the questions of the other members around the fragmentation of the broader site, yeah, it does potentially raise risks, but I'm relatively comfortable because the balance of the allotment is still quite large, albeit that it is perhaps more difficult, or it requires a more tailored specific design, and it's possible it could still accommodate for multiple developments. I guess the situation we have here is that it is still a legitimate proposal to present one land use of a broader precinct, and yes, while we would like to have the other layouts for the remainder of the site, I guess we assess the land that's left over and whether it is reasonable whether that could be developed. I think on balance I think it can be. So on that note, I'm comfortable with it. The matter of the trees, I agree with Paul and his thoughts. I guess we did consider this in quite a bit of detail at the land division stage. It was interesting that when the land was actually rezoned, from memory, that happened prior to the regulation or the Act changes to reduce the circumference of trees for regulated significant trees. So when the land was rezoned, it was considered there was only a limited number of regulated significant trees, but with the reduction in the sizes, it suddenly meant that the site was much more heavily constrained. So I'm mindful of that there needs to be some due consideration given. I think it was inevitable there would be some trees impacted, but I'm not concerned that the ones impacted is unreasonable. With the parking arrangements and the access, I think it's an orderly arrangement. It's been supported by traffic advice. I'm not overly concerned about the stacked parking. I think it is pretty common and I think it can work. So that is okay. I think the changes to the fencing, in addition to the design of the building, enhance the development. And I'm pleased to see that there is fairly detailed landscaping proposal, and there's a bit of scale in there with tree planting as well, so that the overall development be softened by good quality landscape scheme. So look, overall I'm pretty comfortable with it. The only other matter I wanted to raise was in relation to the air conditioning, because it hasn't been addressed in detail and obviously won't be until detailed design. I think it is appropriate that staff do or are able to assess that prior to development approval being granted. And as much as anything, it's a prompt to make sure that that's been addressed, because if it hasn't been and the detailed design comes through and those systems that are selected for, say, air conditioning are in excess of what the acoustic report anticipates, then there's potential for conflict. So I think it's good practice that that is addressed through detailed design. So I would encourage, and I'd actually like to request that be addressed as a reserve matter. Thanks.
No, thank you. And look, similar views, members, satisfied it wasn't seriously at variance. As we've heard, there's plenty of discussion on land use, that the use is envisaged within the zone, but it's a bit, perhaps a bit less clear given the focus of the subzone. But for all the reasons that we've heard so far this evening, I do think that there's enough merit for such a land use in this location. And I guess, unlike the item that we didn't hear that was withdrawn, I had some concerns in that case that the childcare centre might prejudice other land nearby for being used for purposes that are consistent with the zone, and I don't necessarily have that concern here. I think other uses that are envisaged by the strategic innovation zone and the activity subzone can occur within proximity to the centre. Look, I think the building design's reasonably standard, but I do think there are some modern elements, and I think the design changes that have been negotiated by the administration are positive elements that do help it move closer to those iconic policies that we heard about earlier, except the assessment of council staff with respect to the trees. Any removal is regrettable, but I think as other members have said, the rezoning almost meant that some of these trees were always going to need to be removed, and as Aaron said, a lot more were actually caught up in the regulated and significant status as a result of those legislative changes which occurred post that rezoning. So look, I think some of the conditions around landscaping and the landscaping proposal is beneficial to mitigate that. I thought the SONIS report was satisfactory, understanding what Aaron has requested. Parking is sufficient in my view, and I thought that the signage was reasonable in terms of its scale and design. So they were my thoughts, and again, it sounds as if we are generally in agreement. Just with respect to the reserve matter that Aaron has suggested, I know Andrew mentioned before that there was some potential wording, so thank you. If we can have that on the screen. So I'll just give members a moment to read that.
I suppose just as a point of technicality, whether it needs to be amended to be located within and to be located away from, given that the reserve matter will be before construction occurs, so probably a technical point more than anything.
Oh, sorry, do you want to comment? It was just a request to insert the words "to be" in front of "located" on the first two dot points. I think that's yeah. Thank you. Any other members have any comments in respect of that? Does that address what we were considering? I'm seeing non-movement, so I'm taking that as acceptance. All right, members. So like I said, it sounds as if we're all in agreement. We do have that additional reserve matter included on there. Is someone prepared to move the recommendation as it stands? Paul, you're moving. Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded, Aaron. Thank you. I'll put that. All those in favour, please raise your hand. And that's carried unanimously. So for the benefit of those who are here with us, that application has been granted planning consent subject to those reserve matters, obviously conditions and Obviously, the requirements around building consent development approval still to occur. If you do have any further questions on, I'm sure the administration will be happy to help you out the next business day. So thank you very much for your attendance. We appreciate it. Could we invite Misty back in, please? Welcome back, Misty. Thank you for your patience. For your information, it was granted planning consent. Now, members, just the remaining few administrative items on our agenda. Appeals and deferred items. Is there any? There is? By all means. Happy to hear.
I'll just take myself off. Just wanted to update the panel. An appeal has been lodged against the panel's refusal decision from last meeting. So that's for DA 24031376. So that recently got lodged, so we'll go through the process and keep the panel updated as need be. But just thought I would advise of that appeal.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Now, members, other business. Is there any item of... Yes, Paul.
It's a shame that Andrew's left, but it relates to the last item and the subzone. Tell me if it's not appropriate to ask this, but I'm interested to know how that's going to be interpreted for future applications. Was that subzone and that policy introduced to and reference to John Rice Avenue and Mark Road? Did that apply to the original undivided site? And I guess my question is, has that policy now been satisfied because we've approved a development on the corner, or will it still apply to the balance of the site?
I would anticipate that it's met that requirement in terms of it talks about the corner of Mark and John Rice, so this would be the built form, and I think the remaining portion, while we could take, I guess, some context to it, I think this is the main building that addresses that policy in terms of an iconic building.
Thank you. Any other business members? Any other business from the staff? Yes.
Just wanted to raise and have a discussion with the panel in terms of a panel policy for the review of a decision of an assessment manager. Just would advise the panel at present we don't have a policy and or procedure to deal with the review of an assessment manager decision. We have recently received such a request to review a refusal decision of the assessment manager. So just wanted to have an open discussion in terms of pathway moving forward with this, and happy to provide suggestion on a pathway moving forward of how this could be dealt with. Yeah, open it up for discussion first, but then happy to provide my thoughts on it as well.
Members, how do we feel about this? Maybe I will throw to you in a second, Bleeth, just to take us through what your suggested approach might be. But I know most councils do have a policy around how the reviews of assessment manager decisions are handled. Some, as I was having a conversation earlier, are included in the meeting procedures. Some have a separate standalone policy. So there is a variety of different approaches. Do you want to take us through what you were potentially thinking, and then we'll get members' views?
So I think, I guess the advice we've received would be that there's not necessarily a requirement that you must have a policy. I guess the requirement is that you follow legislative process in terms of that. So policy, I guess, just assists in that process to ensure that, I guess, the applicants had a fair and reasonable opportunity as part of the process. So I guess fronting that, it's not a requirement to make a decision, to review a decision, that a policy is in place. One option that we've put forward is that the council assessment panel resolves to adopt the local government association's policy that they put forward for an assessment panel review of a decision of an assessment manager as a standing policy, and then we undertake the, I guess, assessment and bring the application to the next panel meeting in accordance with that policy. And as part of that, we will continue to review the council assessment panel operating procedures and make amendments to include such a review. As part of that question, I guess, open it up to the panel if they would prefer it to be a separate policy or whether that would be as part of the current operating procedures. We could include it as you pointed out, Jeff, having a review of other councils, it's done either way. Some of them include it as part of the operational procedures and others include it as a separate procedural policy as well. So I guess either way is an option. I guess that just provides us with direction for when we bring it back to the panel to adopt.
My curiosity is just around what exactly that's going to look like, because I feel that that kind of opens the floodgates for a bunch of things to just get pushed over the cap. And I wonder, you know, how is that working with other councils, and maybe that's something we need to approach.
I guess it is legislative that it's an opportunity for any decision that an assessment manager makes. It can be a request to review to the council assessment panel rather than appealing straight to the courts. So I guess that opportunity has been there this whole time. The PDI Act has been in operation. So this is, I guess, by having a policy or otherwise wouldn't encourage it any more, any less than what's an opportunity already exists.
Okay, I think both Aaron and I have had experience with on that position at Adelaide Plains, where we received, I think there were 2 or 3 requests for review of refusals of outbuildings. Not big issues, but they did raise some procedural things, and in particular the ability to for the applicant to provide further information or amended plans. So I think a policy is needed to cover those situations. And I'm not sure if the LGA model provides that. But I think in terms of where those policies are written, I think it would be best to have them embedded in the operating procedures of the panel, given that those policies are never going to be applied or enacted on outside the panel process, and I think it makes sense to have them all under the same umbrella.
Yeah, thanks through the chair. And I tend to agree with Paul that there's probably benefit in having it all in the one place, although I don't really think it matters whether it's a separate policy document or whether it's within the operating procedures. I just think it's for simplicity and having it all in the one spot. That makes sense. I do agree with Paul around I guess, dealing with that matter of whether the review is assessed strictly based on the information that was available to the assessment manager at the time the decision was made, or whether, and there's 2 sort of schools of thought here. One is that, yeah, you limit it and keep it fairly strictly limited to what the assessment manager had available, or do you perhaps be more relaxed and recognising that if there is opportunity for perhaps a better outcome or for a resolution, that maybe there could be opportunity for the applicant to be able to submit further information. I guess I see there's probably pros and cons, but having a clear position on that would be good, because I've heard from other councils that there's different views about that. So I think that's beneficial. There's also the other point to raise is that now there has been, I think from memory it was 6 or 12 months ago, some changes to I think they were regulations where now the applicant has to be afforded the right to be able to present. So to the extent the operating procedures of the panel, they can be established, that's fine, but we can't, or the procedures can't override anything within the Act or the regulations.
Yeah, look, I probably don't have a strong view on whether to embed it into the operating procedures or not. I've seen both. The one comment would be that if the intention is to align with the LGA template. From an administration point of view, there's probably benefit to having it as a separate document, because any update to clauses or references are then consistent between the two documents. You're not having different numbering between the two documents, that sort of thing. That's more of a passing comment than anything, though.
Thank you. Well, Misty might end up being the tiebreaker, because I have a view that they should be standalone, but that's just what I've seen in the majority of cases. I think for the same reason Adam outlined, it makes it easier to update it, probably makes it easier to adopt it in the first place, because you're not re-adopting the meeting procedures again, you're just or updating a particular element. It's just easier to consider it as a separate standalone document, and it does make it easier to update it in the future. That's my personal view. There are both options out there, so I don't think it probably really matters which direction we go, but that's the view that I favour. I think for this particular item, it would be a good idea to adopt a policy, even if it is a standing policy, for a short period of time until you can adopt something more formally. I think it's important to have something in place when you consider just to guide the process, acknowledging that it's already been lodged, but you know, to guide the process in terms of it coming to us and the documentation and so forth. So I think that's beneficial. And I guess to some of Misty's points from earlier on, the process is not actually used all that commonly. I think it's been in place for a couple of years. I can only speak to our particular circumstances. We've had 5 in that time, and the process actually works reasonably well. I think, in my view, it gives some guidance to the administration on, you know, whether there was a consensus view about whether the decision was the right one or not. It affords an applicant an opportunity to be heard and to, I guess, get a second opinion, which sometimes can be beneficial for them, and sometimes it can mitigate against the costs of an ERD court appeal as well, which can potentially be beneficial. So, you know, it is a legislative process and we need to allow for it, but I do think it, you know, I was perhaps a little sceptical at first when it was introduced, but I do think the process actually works reasonably well. So they're just my views. I'm conscious I'm not trying to necessarily steer the panel in one direction. Ultimately, we have to come to a consensus view, but for what it's worth, they're my views. So. Yeah, Adam.
I suppose just, oh sorry, a question on process. There wouldn't be anything stopping at a future meeting the operating procedures to be tabled in the earlier part of the agenda, followed by the subsequent hearing of the assessment manager's decision against those procedures, as long as it's, you know, communicated to the applicant and that sort of thing. I've seen that sort of thing done before as well, so that I couldn't imagine that being a huge issue.
Yeah, from our advice, that definitely can occur, such as that. But like I said, there is no requirement to have a policy either to do it, but so by adopting one, and then we would be able to, I guess, discuss in our report and as a panel that we've followed this policy, even if it's only just been adopted as part of when we review that decision as well.
So members, I don't know if anyone wishes to potentially say if they have a strong view now, whether it should be part of the meeting procedures or not, but perhaps also just whether, yeah, we're happy to, this is the proposal that we would adopt it at the next meeting, either as part of the meeting procedures or separate, and then consider the review at the same meeting. Is that what the administration is potentially suggesting?
Yeah, I guess, yes, there's 2 options. I guess one, yeah, there's the opportunity if the panel wishes to, I guess, adopt the local government one as a standing or interim one, and then we could do the assessment manager review at the next meeting. Alternatively, we could update our policy procedure currently, adopt that prior to, I guess, the updated version, adopt that prior, and then and then do the assessment manager review at that point. Just mindful of timing on that one, it may be that it then gets pushed to the following CAP report rather than the next one, just with the administration requirements that go into amending a policy, rather than maybe CAP's, you know, entitled to be able to put forward a policy themselves. So just mindful of time and seeing the assessment manager review within a timely manner. There isn't any legislative requirements in terms of time frame to do that, other than it's just good practice to see it in a timely manner.
Yeah, Aaron.
Yeah, thanks through the chair. I'm happy to take, I guess, direction from staff on how best they think this will work and present it to us. I tend to think that if you've already received the request for review, I think there is, in fairness to the applicant, an importance of bringing that decision as quickly forward to the panel as necessary. So I would take that into consideration and tend to think that the best way to be able to facilitate that would be good. So if it could be done at the same meeting, I think that would be the ideal approach. But yeah, I don't have a strong view about how best these are captured, but I think we do need those procedures in place. So I think, leave it to you guys to bring it forward.
Well, I think I'm seeing general sort of nods of agreement. So I think, as Aaron said, perhaps the best approach is to have the standing policy, the LGA version, acknowledging that it does need, there's some parts that have to be inserted around timeframes and so forth, adopting that and having that on our agenda to do first. In the meantime, progressing the review in accordance with that draft as best you can, and then hopefully the panel will be able to adopt that draft policy as one of the earlier items on the next agenda, and then consider the review in accordance with that. That's probably the best approach. I think I'm hearing sort of general consensus for that, and then of course if the council would like to, I guess it's ultimately up to the panel, but if we'd like to have a different version of that policy moving forward, we can consider that in the future. So, yeah. So, now, do you need anything from us in terms of a resolution to that effect, or just happy to take that as a discussion?
Happy to take that as a discussion, and like I said, we'll have that item ready to go in terms of that policy to adopt early on, and then, as I said, as part of our report that we put forward to you, that we'll ensure that we've made sure that we address what's in that policy, and maybe we can have a discussion at this section following that meeting, or at the next one if there's any additional feedback or information or inclusions we want to make in the policy or procedure moving forward as well.
Excellent. All right, well done. Thank you. So if there's no other business, I think that's where we were. There's no confidential items. I think we've already had the policy discussion around the activity subzone. So if there's no further items of policy discussion, then I'm happy to declare the meeting closed at 7:21 p.m. So thank you, members, for your attendance and deliberation on those items, and thank you also to the staff. Really appreciate all your help and assistance. Good evening.
Did you know your food scraps should go in the green bin or a home compost system? It's better for the environment. It's the right thing to do. And it's easy. Fight food waste by putting all your food scraps, peels and leftovers in the green bin. To find out more, visit playford.sa